Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and welcome to our discussion, Disrupted Silence, Serbia's student movement and the fight for accountability. I'm Epannus. I have the honor to open today's seminar in my role as the head of Ruta Initiatives Committee. This is the fourth event in our seminar series, and there are 3 more to come. I'm happy to share that the next one will take place already in 3 weeks from today, and it is dedicated to Russian disinformation in the Balkans, in Romania and in Moldova. Today's seminar is organized by the Ruta Association for Central, Southeastern and Eastern European, Baltic Caucasus, Central and Northern Asian Studies in Global Conversation. The initial idea for this seminar came from Potakoska Simbekova, one of the founders of the Ruta organization, and we thank Potakos for her initiative here and for her role in organizing this seminar. Before I give a word to the moderator, a bit of housekeeping. Please use the chat function to submit questions. The moderator today is Misha Kapetanovic. Misha is a cultural anthropologist affiliated with the Balkan Research Unit at the Institute for Habsburg and Balkan Studies, Austrian Academy of Sciences in Vienna. His research intersects queer studies, migration, memory politics, and affect in Southeast Europe. Thank you, Misha, for your help and your part in putting this seminar together, and please take it over from here.
Thank you, Ed. On March 15th, 2025, Serbia witnessed one of the largest protests in its recent history, with over 100,000 participants converging in Belgrade to demand accountability and systemic change following the tragic collapse of Novi Sad railway station canopy on November 1st, 2024, which resulted in so far 16 fatalities. Initially a silent vigil commemorating the victims, these gatherings quickly evolved into a powerful student-led movement challenging governmental corruption, negligence, and suppression of civil dissent. University students have been at the forefront, organizing large-scale rallies, marches, and daily blockades throughout Serbia, making significant escalation in public demands for political reform and transparency. Despite governmental resignations, including Prime Minister Miloš Vučević, and international calls from bodies such as European Union, the protests persist, reflecting deep-seated dissatisfaction with systemic corruption. The demonstrations have further intensified due to concern over public safety. Several violent incidents, including vehicles driven into crowds of protesters, have raised alarms domestically and internationally. Adding complexity to these dynamics, allegations of security forces deploying sonic weapons against demonstrators have surfaced, triggering widespread demands for independent investigations. The involvement of Chinese company, notably Chinese Railway International Corporation and China Communication Construction Company in Serbia infrastructure projects under the Belt and Road Initiative further complicates local and regional dynamics. Protesters demand transparency regarding foreign contracts, specifically focusing on potential negligence linked to the Novi Sad tragedy. Today, we gather here to discuss how student mobilizations reshape political engagement in civil society in Serbia. With us, there are 4 speakers, which I'm going to introduce in the following order. Aleksandar Knežević is doctoral candidate in anthropology at University of Belgrade and research associate at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory. Her research examines intersections of evolutionary and anthropological explanations of social phenomena, particularly concerning gender differences through ethnography of science. Her scholarly interests span critical science studies, feminist philosophy of science, focusing especially on the roles of values and the place of critically engaged scholarship in democratic societies. Alongside her academic work, Aleksandar has closely been involved with the student protests from their inception, and she is currently conducting ethnographic fieldwork on ongoing social mobilizations in Serbia. Next to her is Filin Birkhardt, who is a research associate and doctoral candidate at the Slavic Seminar of the University of Zurich. Her research explores documentary aesthetics in Slavic literatures, particularly genres that blend journalism, historiography, and literature, as well as questions of gender and literary canonization in 19th and 20th century Slavic literature traditions. Her doctoral project investigates the documentary method with literary processes. Feline has also made close connections to Serbia and has been following and participating in the student protests in several occasions. Most notably, the last one was from March 5th to 17th. Next to her is Linda Gusija, who is assistant professor at the Department of Sociology, University of Pristina, Kosovo. Her research engages deeply with the issues of gender, sexuality, nationalism, collective memory, and social movements, particularly with the context shaped by the conflict and war. She is a co-founder of the Program for Gender Studies and Research at the University of Pristina, and she has been instrumental in shaping critical feminist scholarship and academic dialogue in Kosovo. She also actively contributes to civil society and public discourse and is a chairperson of the Kosovo 2.0, well-known platform committed to fostering critical journalism and debate on social justice, policy, and gender equality across Kosovo and broader Western Balkan region. And finally, with us is Armina Galiaš, who is assistant professor at the Center for Southeast European Studies at the University of Graz. Armina has her research critically engages nation building and nationalism in Southeast Europe, memory politics, social and political transformations in post-socialist Yugoslavia, identity politics, democratization process, media narratives, and long-term legacies of conflict. Armina has published multiple influential works, but I'm going to take out here two books that are forthcoming this year and which are important for the current conversation. The first is translation of her earlier book, Ein bosnischer Staat in Zeichen des Kriegens, or Bosnian City in the Sign of War, which explores ethnopolitics of everyday life in Banja Luka during the Bosnian War. Her latest book, however, soon to be published by Croatian publisher Srednja Europa, critically engages the concept of Russian world and its counterpart Serbian world through analyzing discourses that surrounding imagined Serbian sphere of influence. Dear panelists, I would like to welcome you, and I would like to open today's panel and today's conversation. Without further ado, I would invite my guests here for the first question, and we'll start with Alexandra. I would like to just to ask you to let us know what is your experience with the protests, how you see current protests, and what was your role in them so far. Alexandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Misha, and thank you everyone for having me today. Hopefully, I will have something meaningful to contribute to today's discussion. So first of all, I would like to briefly specify my position to be completely transparent about my role in the student movement. So I'm a doctoral student at the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Belgrade, but there I haven't been active in the student plenums, nor have I been involved in the student movement. However, as a researcher from the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory, I have been involved as an observer and a researcher at the plenums at the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Novi Sad. So my perspective is basically shaped, three of my identities are shaping my perspective. First one is a research identity. I'm also a philosopher, and I'm an active citizen. So for today's talk, or my short input, better to say, I will speak mostly as a philosopher. So I will not share some historical or anthropological, or maybe anthropological a bit, but sociological or any other social science insights. I would like to maybe open a floor for discussing things that are more out of the ordinary, let's say. So what's currently happening in Serbia is that after the March 15th, students put a huge pressure on the citizens, in a sense that citizens should also organize themselves on a local level through their local municipalities in order to practice direct democracy the way students have been practicing it in the past 4 months. So the idea that student movement has is that citizens should finally become vocal about their own needs on the level of local communities, and not only to be vocal about their communal needs, but also to demand the fulfillment of their needs. And this is the fight that student movement has put forward in the past month, and they have been pressing our citizens to organize themselves. And I believe in the past 2 weeks, let's say, citizens have done this quite successfully. And people everywhere through the whole Serbia are organizing themselves in different ways, and they have different demands. So in a sense, the students' pressure have been successful. On the other hand, the second thing that is happening is that the second half of the February salaries for the university professors hasn't been paid by the Ministry of Education. So professors are now pressed by the professors are in a very difficult position currently, and certain pressures come from the Ministry of Education and from the government per se. So they also feel the need to somehow mobilize themselves and to somehow provide a political articulation of the student movement besides this idea of local organization and then this the practice of direct democracy on the local levels. So this is what is currently happening at the moment as we speak. Professors try to be active at student plenums. They have infiltrated themselves in the student plenums, and they're helping students in different ways, and we can be quite critical about the ways they're doing this. They have been somehow supporting the student demands, but also try to help them or to maybe somehow politically articulate the current student movement and the student protests. And one of the ideas for this political articulation is the interim government. And then the ideas that we are hearing currently is that the student movement should support the interim government, and the interim government should include professors or non-political parties, people who have no political affiliations, and then to represent basically the people in this government. Then, and the role of this government would be to provide the next elections. So this is what's currently happening. I'm not sure how well the audience is familiar with all these events. So this is the current state of the affairs. And maybe I'm not sure how much time I have left. I would just like to briefly add a certain philosophical, ontological, and anthropological thought that I've been developing or thinking so far. And I was thinking about whether the student movement has the capacity to foster a social change in Serbia. And with this whole idea of the direct democracy and the organization at the level of local municipalities in order to demand certain changes, we see basically this demand that comes from the student movement is the demand for the systematic change, for the change in political culture. But I started to think whether the student movement has the potential to maybe foster a more broader culture, broader change, cultural change or social change, which from, let's say, an ontological and anthropological perspective, I see as a change in social norms. And then I started to think what would be one of the biggest contributions of the student movement so far, in this maybe more anthropological way and not only political, is this liberation that they brought about within the population. And this liberation is often somehow reflects within this local organizing and then people being vocal about their political needs and so on and so forth. But I think that this liberation has also a much broader scope. And I think that we are witnessing some particular emotional liberation. And this emotional liberation is, we can witness it every time when we see from the news how the people are welcoming and greeting the students who are basically marching from city to city, from a protest to protest, and people are full of emotion. And these emotions are not only the positive ones, so positive and then directed towards the students, but we also see that people have been liberated with all the negative emotions as well. So people, for the first time, are allowing themselves to feel anger. And behind this anger is not helplessness anymore, but hope. And this anger is not misdirected. It's not directed towards the people who are Vučić supporters and who are the people who are following him on his meetings for a sandwich, for a bottle of water in a plastic bag. But this anger is for the first time directed. Linguistically, we were able to express the same anger. And the term is, of course, Čaci. And Čacis are not the Vučić supporters, but they are the servants of the regime. and we, for the first time, do not feel bad or disrespectful about directing this anger towards particular people, because in the past 13 years, the narrative and this polarization of two societies in Serbia, two different kinds of people, basically has been huge. And what student movement has brought is the unification of people, of all the people on one side, and those who are the servants of the regime on the other side. So this is the type of emotional liberation and also linguistic liberation in a way that the student movement has brought about. And I think this is also important because it allows us to experience different ways of being, to be emotional and at the same time respectful, and to behave morally, even though these emotions are not always positive but negative. So that, yeah, so to speak just ontologically, yes, I think the student movement has brought about the different ways of being, and these different ways of being are basically influencing the change and reshaping of social norms. And I believe this is a really true and honest and genuine social change that we are witnessing today. The question is whether how much time do we need in order to change these deep-seated social norms, which are basically structuring our behavior and so on. So this is for the beginning. Hopefully I was clear enough. And yes, these are my current thoughts.
Thank you, Alexandra. And I would just maybe follow up that to kind of ask you to explain to the audience what Chachi is, and maybe just short what is the mythology around Chachi and how the name became circulating. And then I'm sure also Filin will elaborate on that.
Yes. Well, before the protest on the March 15th, the area, the park in front of the National Assembly was occupied by the Chachis, and Chachis are the people who have been paid, or maybe they were willingly there, and they were basically camping in front of the National Assembly in the park, also in front of the presidency. And they were there and they claimed to be the students who would like to study. And then they were there in order to demand their rights to study and to go to the universities. I think maybe 6 of them were true students, and all others were the ex-war but yeah. So the population there was quite I don't know what would be the proper description. So yes, and I would just like to mention a very nice thing a student said in front of the place where Chachis were being held. Basically, he said, well, everyone who is on this side of the fence are the Chachis, but when they go on our side of the fence, they stop being Chachis, and we welcome them. So this is basically who Chachis are. They are the servants of the regime, and they present themselves as the students who would like to study. However, people who have been there are quite notorious, for the things that they have done in the past.
Thank you, and I think that it's very important also to sit on this small detail that actually Chachi is a misspelling of Jati, which is pupils, which then also in a very mimified way symbolizes the actually what kind of students we are speaking about here who are opposing the protests. Filin, thank you, Alexandra. And Filin, I would invite you just to share us for the first start of your experience with the protests and your observations from what's going on in Serbia.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks a lot for having me today. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion since everybody has another perspective on what is going on. So also to specify very shortly my role in everything. I'm actually right now again in Belgrade. It's like now the 3rd time that I'm here. I came yesterday, and actually I have been right now to the plenum of the Philološki Fakultet from the Faculty of Philology. It's the 3rd time that I have that I had the opportunity to witness how the plenum is functioning. That's connected to my status as a doctoral student in Switzerland at the university in Zurich. And so I guess I can contribute in that way that it that I can share my impressions from the plenary session. So how is that working? How the people are talking with each other? How actually democracy is on life. And the second perspective I would like to share is coming from the literary and cultural studies, how we can analyze the language and the creativity, how the students are using language in a way of creative appropriation, let's say. Concerning the plenary session or the plenum, I would really say this is the heart of the movement. As I said, I was already able to witness 3 such days, actually, because a plenum can last from 1 or 2 hours until 8 hours. It can be really long. It can change every day. The students are communicating via different apps and staging the next plenum for maybe the next day or maybe 2 days. It's really lively in that sense. And I was also able to visit the faculty of geography, of biology, of politics, and as I said already, philology. Each faculty has its own plenary session, and then you have the mega plenum, as it is called, or also veliki sastanak delegata, so the big meeting of the delegates, let's say. And the delegates rotate regularly. So there is always a moderator and 2 recorders. The process is really strongly organized, let's say. So you have the plan for the day. Everybody is voting. We are agreeing to talk about this agenda, what should be added to the agenda, and so on. Of course, I can't speak about the details and the topics of the sessions because, for the obvious reason. So this is something I really wanted to stress, that there are these different plenary sessions or plenums for every faculty, and then they are coming together in the mega plenum. And then there is also communication between the different plenaries from different cities, from Niš, Sombor, I don't know, Kragujevac, and so on. And because of the fact that the delegates are also rotating, so not every time the same person is sent to the mega plenum. Also, this person is changing. That's why we have also no leadership figure, let's say. And I would say this is something also really special about this movement. The students, the young people are really, they really care about the procedures. That's why also they are not stressing Vučić as the president. They are not addressing him. They are addressing the courts. They are addressing the institutions. And to maybe add also something on the way how they are doing or how they express themselves in language and also in art. There is one, so Alexandra already mentioned Jaci, but I would maybe for now, I would like to add the very important word pumpai, which original means to tire an object or also to train muscles, but in a figurative sense, it represents also mutual encouragement. So, but also to pressure on the government. So different meanings are coming together in this one word, and it was long since I mean, now it got a public meme, but it's actually originated to a video from around 2 years ago. But this context is for now not that so central, but what I wanted to like to say is that this one word, pumpai, is, as also other different words, is maybe the most remarkable remarkable example of creative appropriation. So that the protesters combine visual appeal with emotional mobilization and also with humor. Humor is really essential, and it actually addresses also the political rhetoric, which, I mean, the political rhetoric of Vučić, SNS, and the government, which often seems empty and meaningless. So this playfulness is combined with serious resistance, and I think this aspect is really interesting to understand this movement.
Yeah, thank you, Feline. And maybe just to continue on the specific elements of visual elements of that are happening, the protests and memes that are circulating there. I would like to invite Linda to join us also to this conversation. Linda, I already gave short introduction for you, and I wanted to ask you more on how do you see the protests and what's your perspective as an activist and scholar from Kosovo, and especially if we think about actually that this is not the first democratic movement in Serbia, and that when we saw the first protests against Milošević in 1996. And then in 2000s, in between, we had war in Kosovo in 1998 and 1999. And then that also Kosovo independence, the declaration of the independence, received minimum support from actually the democratic forces in Serbia, and lack of accountability on the oppression and colonial processes that Serbian state was implementing there. Today in the protests also we see many Serbian flags and many maps which include Kosovo, and I wanted to ask you what are your reflections on that, and what are your reflections in the process in Serbia as somebody from neighboring state.
As a sister outsider. Thank you, Misho. I really appreciate the space of discussion. I think that it's very important to have this conversation, and I feel honored to have the space and sort of sharing some of the views and maybe some of the concerns that we have looking at the protest from the periphery, but also looking at the protest as somebody who is very much imagined or part of the narrative in the protest as well. Maybe not central part in the narrative, but when Kosovo keeps being mentioned, and Kosovo is somehow in the imagination or in the symbolic of rhetoric and articulation. So for me, I would like just to pose a question, and from the distance, I haven't been able to come or meet with anybody who's organizing in the movement. So I would refer from commenting. I will just from what we see from outside and take that position in this comment. For me, it's very important to ask is, can this movement really sort of imagine the future of Serbia that is, or what kind of the future is this movement imagining? So and I hear, I mean, movements are always messy, and it's always more heterogeneous, and there's always more people. And, the movements, it's easier to mobilize massive movements if you also just attack one person in this sense. Vučić, I would like to comment a little bit more on sort of Vučić's position. Vučić is this sort of personification of this corruption and this evilness, but there's also a lot of rhetoric that Vučić also sold Kosovo, and Vučić is also responsible of losing Kosovo, and which is interesting and concerning because Vučić is exactly part of the sort of Milošević regime, and one of the reasons you mentioned the movement, the students' movement earlier, and the movement against Milošević regime and against the authoritarian regimes in both cases. And this is sort of like the third uprising of students, and I hope it's successful and it's last. But in 2000, when Milošević regime kind of crumbled, the lack of reflection about what brought Milošević to power, what made Milošević possible, and what happened in a breakup of Yugoslavia, and what was the role of Serbia and Serbian nationalism in the breakup of Yugoslavia didn't happen. And one of my concern is that this sort of discussion of sort of maybe dealing with the past, or any sort of willingness to look at the fact that the corruption in Serbia and that everybody's against, and the students are protesting, is a result of this sort of very, very long inherited structural sort of also narratives and beliefs that put always Kosovo in the center of them. Like, we are fighting for Kosovo. This is why we need to be united. We are, so there's, and I think that it's also this it's this weak point of I think of the turning point also, dealing with what Kosovo means in this narrative, and what the future of Serbia is without these territorial understanding of Serbia, or this strict territorial rules and understanding of Serbia. So I would just like to sort of, this is where my worries and my concerns are, and I think that there's really this a point of reflection and point of discussion that makes Kosovo somehow important in this third student movement. So just to put that in, and then maybe we can pick it up and sort of dissect it and talk about it. But the nationalist rhetoric has been a little bit worrying. I talk to a lot of young people and a lot of my students here at University of Pristina. There's always this, oh, we need to show solidarity and support, and there's always this hesitation. You know, when we see the visuals of the protest with Nema predaje, no surrendering, and the map of Kosovo, because it's just in our context, it just means sort of the continuation of that same logic that enabled Milošević and enabled Vučić to do what they did.
Thank you. Thank you. And what's in a very, very dark sense, what is kind of what is comforting to think about Vučić and about current Serbian governments is that Kosovo is not the only enemy of Serbia, and that actually the Croats, the imaginary Croats, have been prominently vilified in media, either through arrests of Croatian citizens in Serbia, or actually through the witch hunts of some individual plenum members who were just having Croatian passports, and that was their crime. So there are many enemies attacking our poor Prime Minister Vučić, but somebody that actually knows a thing or two in a historical process about actually how Serbian nationalism plays between its leaders and elites is Armina. And I'm thinking a lot about Armina's work in actually Republika Srpska and in social history of Banja Luka during the war, but and actually how we might see the repetition of this thing that we, on one side, we have elites that we can blame, but on the other side, we also have willing populations, which is so exemplified here in Chaci. But Armina, for the first thing I wanted to ask you is, how do you see broader dynamics, social dynamics of the protests in Serbia, and how do you see that play out in a broader regional dynamics? Thank you. Your microphone, Armina.
Sorry. So thank you, Misha, and thank you for having me here. And before I begin, I would like just to emphasize that Alexandra has written a remarkable autoethnographic text about the protest for our journal, Contemporary Southeastern Europe, and that I would really like to recommend for our audience to read it later. Yes, there are a lot of questions already has been raised, but I will try now to limit my response to not to Serbia alone, because I see here a possible path and a lesson that could be important for all of us beyond Serbia's borders. And I will try, at least at the beginning, to be somehow optimistic and ignore that what Linda already mentioned with the Kosovo issue and so on. We can discuss it a little bit later. I mean, the focus of this movement on transparency and justice is in line with regional aspirations for democratic consolidation. And I think this is important. And the outcome of these protests could redefine Serbia, influencing both domestic politics and its regional relations. But I would put it even more provocatively and say that also rusty European democracy could also learn something here. So what we are currently seeing and experiencing in Europe and also in the United States, this political shift to the right and to an authoritarian regime accompanied by corruption and cronyism have long been established in Southeastern Europe. I mean, we are familiar with all these waves that we can see now in Europe. And this general dissatisfaction of voters in Europe is palpable. I mean, they are looking for answers outside the current political mainstream. And these voters often rely on unverified news and information. New authoritarian forms of government are spreading, while the reaction and countermeasures against them appear inefficient. And all of these can and is already leading, I mean, we can take a look on the United States, to some kind of radicalization of social conditions and potential conflicts. And the established political parties are increasingly unable to provide answers. They currently appear inadequate and outdated and offer no alternatives. And this kind of authoritarianism is neither new or unknown to those who deal with the Balkans or even broader with Eastern Europe. And this lack of reaction, and that can see often now also outside of the Balkans, has been palpable in Serbia for more than a decade, particularly under the rule of Aleksandar Vučić. And Serbian society suffered from corruption, from nepotism, incompetence, and inactivity of public and state institution. And the public institution hijacked for over a decade now function only under the strict control of one single man and single party. I mean, Vučić authoritarian regime controls virtually all social life and most of the country's media, like, I don't know, some kind of octopus. And I think this is important for us because it's some pattern. So he changed and adapts his narrative daily, and the situation demands. So both internally and externally. In foreign policy, he pursues some kind of catch-all policy and maintains excellent relations with the European Union, with Russia, with China, with Erdogan in Turkey, with the Arab world, and so on. He welcomes Trump and promises everyone everything. And domestically, he presents himself as a statesman, but also as a simple man, as intellectual who knows everything, but also as a simple man who supposedly doesn't even know modern means of communication. He loves Serbia's natural beauty above all else, and at the same time grants highly problematic mining consciences. I mean, the strategy requires no ideological identification and thus no defense of it. And this is more importantly, it deprives the opposition of the opportunity to take alternative position. By refusing to take a clear stance, Vučić occupies the entire ideological field at once, leaving the potential opposition without strength and without, I would say, ammunition for attack. and opposition is already weakened and operating under difficult conditions, but also disorganized and lacking of ideas. They are not able to offer clear alternative to Vučić. And Vučić appeared somehow unshakable, powerful, and worse, there seems to be no way to seriously threaten him. And we can also see this behavior outside of Serbia. I mean, Putin has a very similar strategy where he also tried to cover all political field. And this raised the question of whether the students' protests in Serbia offer a possible alternative. And in such society, there's the new generation. We all heard these accusations for years, so of being apolitical, living in a virtual world, apathetic, and then incapable of bringing change and so on. And such comments often came from those who demonstrated against Slobodan Milošević in the 19th and at least overthrown in 2000, but who themselves did not know how to continue to fight against Vučić. And I think this is important. And now in Serbia, students are demonstrating, and Vučić is visibly shaken. I mean, they found some kind of way to destabilizing him. And these protests have the potential to spark significant societal change by fostering a culture of accountability and participatory governance. Remarkably, the protests maintain their decentralized and leaderless structure. Alexandra talked about it, make it and Feline, making it difficult for the authorities to suppress or co-opt the movement. And it is really collective learning process of grassroots democracy, I would say, and also some kind of social experiment without leadership. And in defining a biographical event for hundreds of thousands of young citizens. And I think this is really important at this point. And regardless of the final outcome, because we don't know, we cannot be sure what's going to be happened in a few months or in a year. But nevertheless, I'm really also, optimistic, and I like this cheerful and this spirit of liberation. But at the same time, I have to address the final outcome somehow. So perhaps critical and a little bit pessimistic. So, I mean, we must ask ourselves, beyond all this potential that the movement carries with it, where all this will ultimately lead, and whether there is a will to power behind it. I'm not sure for this at this moment. And the question is this self-organization enough to bring changes in Serbia? I'm certainly not sure. I certainly don't have answers. And I'm switching also. At some point, I'm totally optimistic. And I know this is something new, and we can take a look and give support. And sometimes I'm also pessimistic, and I'm think, okay, did they or all these students and all supporters have enough power and energy for a long struggle against Vučić and this system? And there are certainly then several other questions that also Linda raised, and we can discuss about it a little bit later. So I would like to finish here now.
Thank you. And I'm going to take and I'm going to dwell on the fact actually that ideologically empty, knows it all populist sort of tyrant is meeting headless movement against him, and that he panics and doesn't know what. And it gives me a lot of pleasure, even though we don't know what tomorrow brings. But to see panic in the Serbian elite's eyes at the moment is a bit comforting, and I think we all agree on that. Alexandra, maybe I would just to continue actually what Armina was saying. I would invite you to give us, if you want to just share a little bit of your article with us and what are your main conclusions, but also maybe some lessons that you learned by following the protests, and what are some kind of positive positive sort of conclusions that you came up with, or some positive ideas that you established there.
Thanks, Misha. So the discussion is so far very interesting, and I have a lot of questions and not so many answers. So the positive things about the student movement so far. So I think one of the issues definitely that pops out when I think about the current situation and maybe the near future and the long future as well is the idea that is quite present within the student movement across the different universities is the idea that the plenum should become institutionalized, which means that the student parliament is the representational the body that uses representational democracy in its decision making should be basically switched to the plenum decision making. So and with regard of this parallel fight that I was mentioning, one fight is that the students are putting pressure on the citizens to organize themselves on the level of local municipalities. And then the other fight is this idea of the interim government or the concrete political articulation of the student protests. So the positive thing definitely that comes to mind is that the student-professor relationship or the academic culture in general will have to change after everything is over. And one of the reasons for that is that the students now, after these past 4 months and probably in the near future, they have liberated themselves, they're emancipated, and they have been thinking about the things that, for example, my generation, and I'm not so old, so it wasn't so long ago, we haven't thought about it. So the way how professors are not behaving towards us, but the way how academic culture is structured and the way the relationship between the students and professors is structuring our academic work, basically, and our student, our times as students has to be changed. And what I hear among the student movement is that they demand to be heard. They demand that their needs are vocalized, that their needs are transparent, and they would like to somehow reshape the environment within the academia and the to make plenums the main decision-making body at the universities is definitely one of the ways to do so. Yes, so that's concretely about what will happen within the student movement after this political struggle is over. At the same time, all the questions that have been raised regarding these nationalist symbols and nationalist elements within the student movement, I'm still a bit optimistic that these nationalist symbols do not come from the student movement, but they come from the citizens, since these are not only the student protests, but the student-led protests. So many citizens are in the streets supporting the students. And one also, again, a big testament to this ideological minimum, as they call it, which is not only an ideological minimum, but also this apolitical strategy that they are taking, is the next protest will happen in Novi Sad. And Novi Sad is also a university city, and it's populated by the Muslim population. So this again is another testament how student movement is uniting the Serbia. And I would also maybe like to reflect on the claim that Vučeć's politics and Vučeć's ideology is basically post-ideology, that his politics and his ideology catches all. And I think why the student movement is so powerful is because they are appropriating this idea of the ideological minimum, as they call it. So they do not see themselves as rightist, as leftist. The only ideology that they are fighting for is this idea of the direct democracy. So yes, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic, even though there is also things that we can be critical about. But yes, this is definitely a social experiment, and no one knows, no one is able to predict what's going to happen, what is going to happen next.
Thank you, Alexandra. And we are getting some questions from the audience already, but I would like to let everybody know that we are going to address them after this round of questions for our panelists. Thank you, Alexandra, once again. And Philippe, maybe I would just invite you to join us in this part of the conversation as well with something that you already mentioned, which is the communication of messages, but also exchange of memes and icons in the protests themselves. And we saw that these protests received plenty of memifiable situations, such as kafica, cigarica, blokadica, or I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that wrong now, or pumpai, how you said, or chaci, or many other. But on one side, we have very memified communication. On the other side, we have no authorship. And it almost feels to me that the fact that Vučić doesn't have anybody to address and to attack is partly explainable by Gen Z's fear of cringe and Gen Z's fear of actually coming out and actually speaking anything that is not in the language of meme. So beyond these very superficial judgments of elderly millennial, do you mind telling us more about how you understand that? Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot for the question. And it's a huge one because there are so many aspects I could elaborate on that. But let me just first add something regarding what Alexandra just have said. So I also would totally agree that this, let's say, atmosphere of absolute division, which Vučić was creating in society the last years, that the students managed to join forces against this atmosphere of absolute division. That's, I think, something really big they achieved. But let me coming back to the language. I would argue, or that's what I've observed, that the students are just not addressing Vučić or let's say the rhetorics. Maybe there is one slogan, nisi nadležan, you are not in charge. This is maybe the only sentence they addressed it to him to say him, you are not the one with whom we want to talk. But despite of that, they are just doing their own. And they just make up their own language and their own, let's say, discourse. And they are doing it very creatively. So I can just share some examples. For example, at the demonstration on the 1st of February in Novi Sad, where have been more than 100,000 demonstrators and protesters, and this was one of the most biggest demonstrations the last months. You could see a very popular margarine with the slogan, it goes with everything, in Serbian, u sve se meša. So it mixes into everything, this margarine, but in spite of the logo, you've seen Vučić's face, because he goes with everything. So he has just no point. That's the message, let's say, from the students. And then there have been also faces of Vučić and Ana Brnabić, which were photoshopped as Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. So referencing their faith to the French Revolution. You could see some slogans like "Nije lepo da lažeš," it's not nice that you are lying, which is a very well-known phrase from a Serbian film, Terribly Cold. That's the title of the film. It doesn't matter, but it's just functioning. It's intuition. I guess you understand what I wanted to say. And there are also some global pop culture which is coming up. So, for example, at one poster I could see Fred Jones from Scooby-Doo unmasking President Vučić to reveal his true identity as a criminal. So you see, this irony just spotlights the gap between the official narratives and the reality. This is something how I would argue that this language is functioning. So this irony is just showing the gap between what the people are really, how the life of the people looks like and what is told in the official narratives. And maybe just let me add a last point to that, which is concerning, let's say, performativity of the protest. I guess everybody witnessed the marches through the whole country. So there have been many marches, for example, from Novi Sad to Belgrade, but also a march to Kragujevac when the big protest was in Kragujevac. And this march format dates also back to the 1990s, when the founder of the Exit Festival called the students from Novi Sad to go to Belgrade in 96, 97. And actually what the students also started yesterday, so they are bicycling now to Strasbourg. This is also, let's say, the I treat it in the context of the march format, and now we have the bicycle format as a performative way of showing and addressing their demands. And so they, in this creative way, they are not only stating their demands, but they are doing it in a, as I already said, in a performativity way.
Yeah, thank you. And continuing on that line, I would like to ask Linda also. You spoke actually about the messy and complicated politics of the protests, and I wanted to also engage you in the questions about messy and complicated politics of solidarity. Actually, from your perspective, what are the ways of working with and actually and understanding and trying to be smart about like supporting the forces that appear to be similar in values, even though they are big, complicated, cacophonic, and sometimes they are producing rather problematic and impressive messages. How do you see this, and how do you actually, what are your possibilities to working together?
I mean, we have to connect from where we are, from this very difficult, conflicting position. We are connected. And we, sort of the fate and the dynamic of the region is interconnected. Solidarity, as Judith Butler says, is not a consensus. We don't have to agree. We don't have to even necessarily love each other. We have to identify a common enemy. And, the enemies today are very common for all of us. We are all under a big threat of all this economic crisis, environmental crisis, the crisis of rising authoritarian regime. And I think because of our past, and despite it, we need to find a way to see the commonality and to see that we are fighting that, the quests for liberties, the quests for democracy is still valid, and then we need to join together in these fights and in these articulations. We need to have these difficult conversations. We need to understand that we will not agree. And I think that this is one of the biggest lesson that the left in general needs to learn, is that we don't need to agree with everything. And solidarity is not just I completely agree with you. I like you. Thumbs up. I agree with you. It's also this critique, and this also like staying with this difficult conversation in a sort of, in a sense, because you want to make it better, because you want to make it work, because you want. I truly believe in this dissident and the role of change that this movement have and this activism has. And this is why I think that, you know, from my position, I have to point into the red flags, and I have to point into this difficult conversations that we need to have. But I think in general in the region, I see that we need to stay within this difficulty and agree that we will not have consensus, but agree that we need to fight this together. And I think this is a strong base, and this is how this movement is working in Serbia. That the students are really trying to say, okay, you know, we are just not gonna we're gonna have it very open and allow for different voices. I think that you know, they are expanding, and I think that the more difficult voices really come from I don't know, places like Kosovo and places like Bosnia and Croatia because of our past. So but we need to definitely make an effort and show up in solidarity. And then I think that these conversations as the one that we are having now are maybe like one way of seeing our differences and staying with that difficulty. So yeah.
Yeah, and I would also like to add the difficult questions are not lacking, and actually we will have an opportunity to engage in some specific difficult questions already posed here at the panel, because I see them in the audience questions. But before we jump into that, Armina, I would like to go back to you for some thoughts that you had that you would like to join, but also maybe just to come back to also what do these protests mean for Serbia internationally, if you would like to comment on that, or your thoughts and how actually this affects broader processes that Serbia is implemented in.
I mean, internationally, I think that these protests are met with sort of sympathy and met with, you know, there's some hesitation. There's some, because they don't have a leader. They don't have anybody replacing Vučić on the place. So there's this lack of structures that I think that makes the rest. We are comfortable more on thinking on terms of, okay, what is the structure? Who is this? Who is the leader? What exactly is going to be New Serbia? What exactly are you imagining? What is the future? What does this future hold for Serbia and for this movement? So, you know, these are the sort of open-ended question that you know, I think that all of us neighbors have when we follow the movement and when we follow the students, is this sort of, okay, how are you positioning yourself toward these difficult questions? And I completely understand that this is too early, and I completely understand that massive movements are heterogeneous. They are not speaking in one voice, and it's that's the beauty of the movement. Also, I completely understand also the power of nationalism to massively mobilize. Unfortunately, we globally are living in times where we still rely on nationalism to massively mobilize.
Thank you, Linda. And Armina, if I may invite you also with the same questions, actually, some thoughts that you had from the conversation, and also, but maybe to come back to what do these protests mean internationally for Serbia?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sure. But I just want to add something, and I think it is connected to all these questions and answers that we heard. I saw one meme, and I think it is really great, and it is somehow gave me hopes how it is possible to change nationalistic narrative in this protest. And that was, so next year in prison, and it is referring for this nationalistic lead. So that means next year in Prizren, I mean in Kosovo, and they just changed it, and they changed it so effectively with only one change letter. I mean, next year in prison is much better, I think, to hear than the next year in a prison. And so I think it is also very, very important to see how Vučić is trying to respond on this protest, and this is somehow connected with this international presentation of the protest in Serbia, because I mean this state power, or rather the president who embodies it, he doesn't even know how to react on it. And I think this is actually the best proof that the protests are doing something right. I mean, they represent something new, something he cannot immediately control or dominate. And I would say this is also a major differences when we are looking on the differences on an international level between Turkey and Serbia at the moment, and we can see actually that finally, I mean, there are some similarities and some differences between Serbia on one side and Turkey, or even Russia on the other side. But in Turkey, just like in Serbia, students point fundamental systematic faults. But I mean, the same as in Serbia. But in Serbia, the president cannot act as repressively as Erdogan does. And he does not dare to use such extreme violence or carry out mass arrests. And one hand, because Serbia is not geopolitically significant as Turkey, and on the other, because he is trying to balance too many positions at once. And this is what Vučić all the time is dealing with. I mean, they try to satisfy all sides, the European Union, and Turkey and China and so on. On the other hand, we certainly have this problem with the European Union, and I mean, I'm with full awareness. I didn't say ever that is a great what is happening in Serbia, because they can bring Serbia near to the European integration or to the European Union, because I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, European Union and Europe has to learn something from Serbia, and we are all familiar with this lithium story. I mean, and we can see how these geopolitical interests are somehow cumulated at the moment in Serbia. And what makes it also difficult for Vučić to defeat all these demonstration and protest is also that the protests also ignore the internal Serbian question, West or East. I mean, it is not clear what the students are positioning themselves. I mean, they are trying to take care of Serbia, and they are not trying to make Serbia more European or more Orthodox or more Russian or whatever. And I think it is really important, and they have stick on this position. And as we already heard, the movement has mobilized and got extensive support from various sectors of society, including professors, lawyers, farmers, taxi drivers, even pensioners. I mean, this is the seniors even organized their own protest to support the students in Belgrade. There were powerful images of retreats and students embracing in Belgrade. They also supported the students during the marches across Serbia, bringing food and drinks and offering the help. And this clearly illustrates a broad-based coalition against perceived governmental misconduct. And I think this is also something which is in the last, at least in the last month, recognized internationally. And my only fear is actually that the Vučić, the last weapon is the exhaustion of movement, and we just, I don't know, I think we have to try to support it somehow. We as from academia or as activists, and I think it will be also nice to have some more international recognition of that what happened in Serbia, and just to think about it. I mean, that we would have such kind of demonstration in Italy or in France or in Great Britain. I mean, our media will be full of it, but because it is in Serbia and there are also a different particular interest and this desire of some kind stability, these questions are very often ignored, and we can still see that this part of Europe is periphery of Europe, and it's not in the focus of the Europe or world or whatever. And I would like to stop here so that we have at least a little bit time for discussion. So
yeah, thank you so much. And I think this is a great point to leave us with, and this is the hesitance to support of Serbia and also know it best of the Western scholarship and activists who know already of Serbia, and they have kind of block image of what Serbia can bring, and then are acting within that rather than to actually sit and listen what's going on in the field. And thank you for that. I'm going to open the questions for the audience now. And actually, since we have actually two very complicated questions for anonymous attendee, I hope that you'll forgive me if I summarize your questions. Two questions, and then I would kindly invite you to add if I missed something. The questions are addressed to Alexandra, but I would like to invite everybody else to join in if you guys feel that you want to contribute. The first question is dealing with nationalism and war veterans. And the summary of it would be, how does the movement address persistent issue of nationalism, particularly troubling presence of war veterans from conflicts in Croatia, Bosnia, and Kosovo, who are supported and welcomed by the protesters? And I would like to add a small caveat that they are actually supported by protesters on both sides, protesters for government and against government. But I'll let you to answer that, Alexandra. And the other one is regarding the recent protest action where participants plan to cycle to Strasbourg. Does the initiative include solidarity with movements in Western Europe advocating for Palestine and against fascism? And additionally, what is the ultimate objective of this cycling action? So this would be my summary. Again, I would invite the author to add a few more details if I missed them. And Alexandra, I would invite you to share your thoughts on these two rather big questions.
Yes, the biggest. Thank you, Misha. So regarding the nationalism, I think I do not want to be biased, and I do not want to be uncritical about the student movement, but still I do think that nationalism is not the mainstream or the most important narrative which is put forward by the student movement. So nationalism is present. Certain faculties are more nationalist, leaning more towards the right ideologies, and other faculties, historically as well, are leaning more towards the left. I still think the left has a big issue, and the issue is that the young people, the Gen Zs, who are appropriating the values that are associated with the left, do not identify themselves as the left, as the leftist, basically because they do not have the figures in the public arena with whom they can identify. So that's the issue regarding the different ideological structures within the faculties, which have existed even before the student movement. So, but however, I still think that it's important to mention that one of the very transparent and explicit narrative of the student movement is this ideological minimum. An ideological minimum means that the student movement is not appropriating any ideology as its own ideology that they are advocating for. In that way, nationalism is not so present within the movement. And another thing regarding the symbols, which is also part of the question. So when we see the footages of the what's happening, how the plenums look like, and how the amphitheaters look like, so we can see these symbols like Cyrillica, Cyrillics, or the Serbian flag, which are usually interpreted as the nationalist symbols. And I think one of the strengths of the student movement is that they are using these nationalist symbols and not really giving them this, they're using the Serbian symbols, but not giving them this nationalist meaning. So they are completely appropriating these symbols and presenting them as the cultural identity of Serbian culture. So this is not anymore about the nationalism, but it's more anthropological. It's more about the culture. So, and it also somehow relates to the issue about the West and the East, and where the student movements see themselves within these big opposites. And I think one of the reasons why these symbols are now being reappropriated as cultural symbols is in order to resist the pressures, the so-called Western values, which are of course very controversial ways to put it, but they are somehow trying to build a cultural identity and to be proud of our own identity. So that's regarding the symbols, which I think is important to mention. And still, I think the war veterans who are supporting the movement are there because of the ideological minimum. So basically, everyone is supporting the student movement who is against Vučić. And the student movement, with their the way how they are presenting themselves to the public, allows that everyone identifies with their struggle. The values that they are fighting for are the justice, love, solidarity. So basically Gen Z values, and that very common sense values as well. So hopefully this answers a question a bit.
At least for me, it opens a conversation, and I would like that we stay and kind of widen this conversation, because I think it's necessary. Would anybody else like to join in answering this question?
I would actually, because you said, it's like this cultural symbols, but these cultural symbols and anthropological symbols, as you put it, have a very clear political meaning to the rest of the rest of the region. So they're not neutral cultural symbols. It's not like that's not just a flag, but it's a flag with a certain borders of another country, and with the words they say, there is no surrendering, that we're not recognizing, we're not. So, there's not just anthropological cultural symbols, they're heavily political symbols. And the hesitation and the reason why the movement is seen from academia with a little bit of, okay, where is it going? It's because it's so centrist. The movement came out of the outrage and the fury, but the movement, I understand, that is purposely allowing this centrist approach because it doesn't want to be pushed left or right, because they want to allow all sort of walk of lives to be present in the movement, because it makes the movement massive, and the massive movements are scary. But the movements, the longer they mingle into this center, the longer they have a more potential, and we know this from other movements. They have potential to disperse, because you need to have more sort of consolidated push to the left or to the right in the center of what is your political articulation. And you cannot, even the 68, that was, the cultural movement, it was a political movement. The movements are political, especially in this day of age, especially with how much this movement means for the entire region. So it's not like removing this and focusing on cool, nice symbols and the language we all understand. It makes us all bubbly and nice because we recognize the symbolic, and the symbolic is cool, but the movement also needs to articulate its position, and the sooner it articulates its position, it consolidates faster and becomes a better, it brings itself into certain position. You cannot have a movement that, the centrist movements or can maybe overthrow a government if it's weak, but they have to bring something else to it. And I think that this is the hesitation, and this is what worries us, and this is where sort of that Pandora box opens, and on this sort of claim neutrality, which is not one, which is not so. I mean, it's not neutral.
Thank you, Linda. Would anybody else like to pick up on this question? No. Oh, yeah. Armina, just your mind. No, okay. You're. Yeah, I
maybe
don't hear
I
you,
would.
but,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
go.
maybe I would also add something on this, because I guess so I totally agree that there has to be some, let's say, statement actually, it's an internal contradiction. The students all the time are saying we are not political, but although, of course, they are really political, and we are aware of that. And when it comes to crimes concerning the 1990s and so on, I really would say that the students are kind of naive, although they have fully my support. I really think nationalism is not the core of the movement, but they are kind of naive about their own history in this very specific aspect. What again doesn't mean that we do not have to support them. I would just suggest that we kind of talk with them and critically get in touch with each other and have a dialogue. And I, concerning maybe one brigade, so the 63rd Brigade, which was seen at the protest on March 15, and again also veterans have been seen on the other side, even though even veterans from the JSO, so from the Jedinica za specijalne JSO operacje, so the formation for special operations, which is, as we know, responsible for the murder of Gingic in 2003. So we do have them on all sides. It's a big issue, I would say, for the whole society, not only for the students. But when it comes, for example, to this one brigade, the 63rd Brigade, on March 15th, I would just I would suggest that we speak with those who already started, or not started, but who already do research on that. For example, Kandic, she is the founder of the Humanitarian Law Center here in Belgrade, and she gave already interviews about this aspect for the Radio Liberty. So there is already starting a conversation, but again, the students, I guess, or I would suggest, they have to be aware of the symbolism, and the symbolism represents the bloody past of the region. So a clear distancing would also be a sign for looking to the future, which they do want.
Thank you, Feline. And Armina had the problems with her mic, so I'm going to give floor to Armina in a second. But since we are exactly now at the time that was scheduled for the roundtable, I would like to let our viewership to know that we are going to extend a little bit. We're going to have at least one more question, and if you have any more questions, this would be the last moment to pose them. We're going to answer the question, and then we're going to close, hopefully in some next 10 to 15 minutes for those that are working on tight schedules on Friday afternoon. So bear with us, and Armina, I give the floor to you.
Thank you. I will try really to make it very briefly. I think it is now the possibility, or it is our desire or our goal to defeat authoritarian regime. And it is a struggle for democracy. It is not a struggle, or I don't have a vision, or I don't have the hope that they will I don't know, create a state which is perfect, or to create a new society based on my wishes and visions. I think it is really important to have a democratic society, and I found this way with this direct democracy, so where every voice can be heard, to give the possibility to try to find a solution. Because I mean, with the Vučić, we certainly will never find any kind of solution in the region or for Kosovo or whatever. But this gives us some kind of opportunity for discussion, for to be a disagree or to agree, but it is possibility to make this society, I mean, more democratic. And this is most important, and this is why I do support really this protest. And I also have to admit to the Serbian flag, actually for the first time, I didn't see Serbian flag as some kind of threat during this demonstration. I really understood this flag as somehow identification with the state. I mean, and with some kind of desire to gain the state again for themselves. I mean, it is somehow, as we know that the state is captured. It is captured by Vučić, and the citizens of this state, they have a right to gain this state again for them, and the representations of the states are still flags and similar insignias. So I really don't see it as a threat. And certainly there are some nationalists, and they will always be the nationalists in every society. But it is certainly also the question, how many of them, and how can we deal with the new situation? And I think this is important for me, at least at this stage now. So
thank you, Armina. And I, as a moderator, I would like to restrain myself from sharing my 2 cents, but I would like to remind everybody that we are currently at a round table organized by Ruta Association, which is organized as a follow-up and response to full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine. And the issue of full-scale Russian invasion in Ukraine was one of those questions in the Balkans where actually messy and complicated political situations also destabilized or sort of stopped people from providing support, or gave excuse for people to provide support when support was needed. Therefore, I would not like to suggest any easy solutions, but I think this opening of these difficult questions is necessary to sit down, and it is something that connects our 2 regions. Having said that, I would like to continue on our last question for today, and that's a question that was posed by Emma, and she is asking, could you please talk about geography of the protests? It seems like there is a deliberate effort to encourage mobilization across the country. Could you please talk about this, and is support for the movement stronger in certain regions? I again feel that this question addresses both Feline and Alexandra, so I would invite 2 of you to answer first, but also Linda and Armina, if you wanted to add, I invite you.
Should I go first? So I think I can be very brief with this response. Yes, definitely the student movement tries to mobilize the citizens through the whole country. And the biggest mobilization happens in the cities that are university centers. So Belgrade, Novi Sad, even Subotica, Niš, Kragujevac, and now in next week Novi Pazar. So yes, definitely, and I think the support for the student movement is also covers the whole region, the whole country. However, I think that maybe the south of Serbia, around Čačak, they have been the most powerful in demanding and being vocal about their rights and demanding their needs to be met. So Vojvodina, where I come from, the north part of Serbia, they're culturally a bit different from the south, so maybe the change is not so quick here, but the south definitely is strong, and the support for the student movement is across the country.
Thank you, Alexandra. And Philippe, what are your thoughts on geography of the protests?
Also, again, very shortly, because actually Alexandra has already said everything, but maybe just to add that this is a really big difference from the protest from the 1990s, so the fall of Slobodan Milošević, where the people were mostly active in the cities. But what we witness today is really that we have demonstration in provinces, in small villages, where people really can lose a lot. So you have more little communities, and you depend also on people from the party SNS, from the government party, which are in the main positions in schools, in the medicine system, in the public institutes. So it is a really broad movement.
Thank you, Feline. And with these two answers, I would like to invite our panelists, if anybody would like to share some final thoughts, or if not, then we would take this panel towards the end. One technical issue I was explained that we would have to stay to sort out some technical difficulties from the beginning. So I invite you to stay after the panel ends. But before that, I would like to invite you, just if you wanted to share some thoughts, that now is the floor is yours. And considering my question might be awkward and strange, I can also invite you just to say thank you, and maybe we make round with that. And then we also give a signal to people to that the panel ends that way. I'm sorry, people, but this is online format. And even though it's 4 years here already, we are still having difficulties with how to lead it in a normal way. So maybe in the line that we were also inviting the presenters, Alexandra, I would invite you to start first.
To start first with my closing remarks, or just saying thanks to everyone?
Just whatever you want, whichever works for you better.
Yes, I would. Yes. So regarding the closing remarks, I have so many thoughts and so many impressions that it's quite difficult to somehow put them in a short sentences in this kind of format. But of course, I appreciate the organization of the event. And yes, if anyone has questions, I can share my email and I will gladly answer them. And I would also like to thank Linda for sharing her perspective. It was very valuable, and I absolutely understand the fears, and I understand how these symbols are being seen from those who suffered from the different historical narratives and so on and so forth. However, I somehow would like to invite everyone to be not to be optimistic and positive about the movement. We have to be critical about it, definitely, but maybe we should somehow be more freely understand what's happening, in a sense, to give floor, to give space for the student movement to really deeply change the things that have been deeply seated in our society. So we should give them some space to try to do so, even though the matters are quite complex and difficult.
Thank you, Alexandra. Feline?
Yeah, so also from my side, thank you very much for the discussion, and especially thanks to Linda also. And yeah, let's talk again. I mean, I would really appreciate to keep in touch.
Thank you. Linda?
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really want to have a positive approach. I see it from a different perspective because I am sitting in a different place. I understand that this conversation is difficult. I understand that it's to be consolidated, but we also want to see a different Serbia. We grew up, we became old people under Serbia that wanted to annihilate us, finds us more inferior and not worthy of life. So when we see those symbols, we just don't want that the new Serbia that is being promised and that the students are fighting for to have those same in consideration towards other lives and other places. So this is my concern, and I find it, despite the generosity that I want to look at the movement with, my position and my life experience teaches me to be careful and to speak out when I see flags like this. And this is I'm doing it from a place of concern, but also a place of really wanting to see a different Serbia, because it affects my life, it affects my daughter's life. You know, it's this this connection that has serious consequences in my personal life as well. So this is why, for me, this is not just a movement that goes on in another country and the movement that goes on across the border. This has significant implications in my life also. So this is why the concerns are coming from a very sincere place, and not just like a critique of somebody that doesn't know the movement or doesn't understand the dynamics and complexity of the movements. I have been part of many movements similar to this, demanding democracy, demanding liberty. So I understand the euphoria, I understand the need for homogeneity, I understand the need for consolidation, I understand the need for support of others, but there are things that the sooner that they are addressed, the more effective it is. And I think that the question of Kosovo and the questions of flag is just not a flag for all of us in the region, you know. So you need to understand, and this naivete towards history and toward what's happened in their names, in this young people's name, needs to be part of the conversation, because I really, to be honest, don't see a new Serbia without this like deep, honest look in the mirror and on what happened in the past. So I don't think that you can overcome. It's like when you know, dealing with yourself, you really have to go to and be honest about certain things. So and this doesn't really come as a I know it sounds like a critique. It comes more as a concern, and I'm really trying to find ways to articulate it as a concern, not as a critique. I'm in no position to critique it. It's not my movement, but I just as a concern. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Linda. And Armina?
Thank you, and I completely understand, Linda. I'm sitting now in Banja Luka in Republika Srpska, and I know what is she talking about, and I'm very familiar with different forms of Serbian nationalism. But actually, I see in these movements the possibility and chance to change it. Actually, because with the situation as it is now, I don't see any possibility for change. And with the movement, there is a possibility, and we have just be optimistic and hope for a West. And yes, I'm sharing certainly these concerns from your perspective, my or Alexandra or whatever. But I'm also sure we will certainly talk about it for a long time. This is certainly not last time, and this is actually good, and I'm really happy that we have this opportunity now to share our experience and visions and thoughts. And thank you for having me here, invitation, and I also can share my email, and I hope we all stay in touch and we can continue this discussion in some other form. So thank you.
Thank you. So this is a task for Ruta. Then to next newsletter, we also share your and ours email, so we continue with this conversation. In a second, I'm going to give a word to Eb, and who is going to close, or no? Okay, then I'm going to close the panel right now. But before we leave, I would just like to notice that minus my charming presence, this has been all-female panel speaking about politics, and I would like to clap on that. I think that's a remarkable thing, and we need more of that. Having said that, I would like to thank our audience for joining us today, and I would like to invite you for the next Ruta Roundtable, and to our speakers, and just to kindly invite the speakers to stay after we end the panel. But I would like to declare this panel ended. Thank you, guys.